How you doing there? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Ayin Daled, Daf 74 of nesech Avodah Zarah. Friends, your friends. I still have a glass of water here with me. I'm not 100% yet, I would say, but I think every day I'm getting better. It seems like every day I'm getting a little better. We fixed the air conditioner yesterday, and now it's actually really freezing. Hopefully I won't get re-sick once I get better. But it's good to have, wow, it feels like the air conditioner is brand new. Chaver, on today's Daf Ayin Daled, Daf 74 of nesech Avodah Zarah, there's 3 parts. 2 of them are on Ayin Daled Amud Aleph, and then the third on Ayin Daled Amud Beis. The first part is things that are asur in any amount. It's actually kind of interesting. It's like almost like the next step of what we learned yesterday at the end of the daf. At the end of the daf, we were talking about min b'mino, which is asur b'mashu. We saw the machlekes between Rav and Shmuel and Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish. And now we're discussing other things that are asur in any amount, but not necessarily in a mixture that you're eating, not necessarily with food, right? Up until now, we've been talking about no Saint Tom and things like that. Things imparting flavor. We are now going to discuss things that make a mixture asur in any amount, but not necessarily things that you eat. Okay, we'll get to that in just a moment, in a few minutes. Then, next, we'll discuss Yayn nesech that falls into a pit. Once again, it feels like it's like the millionth time, but I think that's probably the last time in nesech Avodah Zarah, being that there's only 3 daf left, including this one. And that'll be like pretty small. And then, on Daf Ayin Daled Amud Beis, we have a new Mishnah that talks about kashering a wine press. Kashering a wine press. And this kind of will transition into the topics until the end of the Masechta, which again is only another 3 daf, including this one. In terms of kashering things, this part today is a little more abstract, I would say, but then we're going to kind of, tomorrow on Ayin Amud Beis, we're going to transition into like Hagala and Libun and Mikvah and Tvila, things like that. So that is what is on the agenda today. I guess maybe you could say almost like wrapping up the Yayn nesech kind of stuff and moving into like a Kashering kind of sugyas. But this should be an interesting daf. Let's do it. All right, friends, we are going to begin on Daf Ayin Daled Amud Aleph at the Mishnah, all the way at the top. Elu asur, the following things are asur. V'osum b'chol shu, and they make things asur in any amount. Yayn nesech, of course, Yayn nesech that we've been learning about, and as we saw yesterday, at least when it's min b'mino, I imagine it's osir b'kol shu. V'avodas k'chovim, as well as Avodah Zarah, right? So if you have Avodah Zarah, that's what does Rashi say? Tzurish avdua v'nis'ayva be'elef tzuris. Right? So if you have something that was worshipped and then it gets mixed together with a whole bunch of other things, well, the fact that there's one of these things that were worshipped makes the whole lot of them asur. The oros levuvin. Who remembers what oros levuvin are? Hopefully I do. I think oros levuvin, we had said, were these hides that were stripped from an animal with like a slit by the heart, where basically they like stuck their hand in and pulled the heart out. Not very nice. So those, v'shora niskel. If you have a ox that killed a person, and therefore, is this talking about before it was stoned or after it was stoned? I think maybe after it's stoned. Let me actually check that out quickly. Okay, so I just looked it up. Actually, interestingly, it could be talking about either before it's killed or after. It's a machlokas. If the ox immediately becomes asur once it is condemned to be that, so to be killed. So, like, let's say you have an ox, okay, and the ox kills a person. So the halacha is, it says in the Torah, that we stone the ox. So it's actually machlokas if the ox becomes immediately asur once it has been condemned, or is it only asur after it's actually been stoned? So if it's talking about that it becomes asur immediately after it's condemned, so then it could even be talking about while it's still alive, it gets mixed together with other oxen, and then all those oxen become asur. Alternatively, it could be talking about after it was already stoned, and then the meat gets mixed together with some other meat. So all of the meat will be asur. Okay. The egla arufa. Okay, if you have a person was killed in the middle of nowhere, we don't know who the murderer was. So there's it's described in Taka this week's parsha. I think when I'm recording this week's parsha is Shoftim. I think egla arufa, I believe, is at the end of parsha's Shoftim. So we basically take this calf and what do? We cut off its head, right? I think we chop off its head. So that egla arufa is asur ba'ano, and also if that gets mixed together with other meat, I think also this is talking about after it's already been killed. I think it's asur ba'ano. V'tzipori mitzora, also the birds of a mitzora, when a leper, a mitzora, is done being all mitzori, so part of his purification process, he brings 2 birds, so those birds that get mixed together with other birds, all the birds are asur. V'seyar nazir, the hair of a Nazirite, that a Nazir, this person who says, I'm not going to drink wine and that kind of stuff, let's say for 30 days, at the end, he shaves off his hair, and that hair is going to be asur ba'ano. Okay, well, okay, yeah, asur ba'ano, and also if it gets mixed together with other stuff, all the stuff is going to be asur. Ufeter chomer, and the firstborn donkey, right? Beter chomer tifte beseh. The halacha is that when you have a firstborn donkey, you have to redeem it with a sheep. Okay, so prior to doing that, yeah, it's asur ba'ano. Then if it will make other animals, I guess, they make a whole mixture. Asur if it gets mixed together with all these other animals. Well, basar b'chalav, if you have meat that's a milk fell on it and now it becomes asur because of basar b'chalav, and that meat gets mixed together with other meat. V'sari mishtaleach, and the goat on Yom Kippur that gets chucked off of the cliff. So then if that goat gets mixed together with other goats or whatever, all the goats would be asur. V'chulin shenishchatu ba'azara, and non-sacrificial meat that was offered that was slaughtered in the azar. So if you just take like a sheep or something because you want lunch and you slaughter it in the azar, that's chulin shenishchatu ba'azara. So also if that meat gets mixed together with other meat, all the meat becomes asur. Shish. So all of these things listed here are forbidden, they are asur, and if they are in a mixture, they will make the whole mixture asur. So now says the Gemara, Tana Maika Choshen. What's the criteria, for being listed in this Mishnah? Well, if the criteria is that it needs to be something that is significant enough that it is counted, something that's significant enough that it's counted, well, what about nevela? Why didn't we include nevela? If you have pieces of nevela meat, unslaughtered meat, right? Meat that was killed that wasn't properly slaughtered. So those pieces of meat that get mixed, right? Those slabs of meat are significant, steaks, whatever, significant enough that they would be things that would be counted. So if we're listing things that are asur and counted, so nevela is something that is counted. So isur anoya kachashiv, we say, yeah, well, the things that we're not, the nevela, as we learned actually earlier in the Masechta, is motor ba'ana, right? You could sell, right? Oh, machor len ochri, says the apostle. You could sell it to an ovid kachod. So nevela is motor ba'ana. So if we're saying, well, the reason why nevela is excluded is because the Mishnah is listing things that are asur ba'ana. Well, if that's the case, Okay, why not list chometz on Pesach? Chometz on Pesach is asur ba'ano, so why not list that in this Mishnah? This, the Tana of our Mishnah is considering two criteria. Both of the things listed earlier, when they're combined. Something that is significant, that it is counted, and is also asur ba'ano. So while nevela is counted, it's mutar ba'ano. And while chometz is asur ba'ano, it's not something that would be counted for bits of chometz necessarily. Although we're going to get more, we're going to dig deeper into that just now. The lesson there goes a perech v'rimoni bidon, and why not include in our list perech nuts? I guess these are special nuts that were like very gewaldig. I wonder if in Shuk Machne Yehuda they have perech nuts. Hillel, what do you think? V'rimone bidon or bidon pomegranates. It must, I bet it's going to be pomegranate. Pomegranate season must be around the corner. Ooh, I should probably get pomegranates this year. Pomegranates are tricky. They're hard to open up and stuff. But then again, so is a watermelon. Yeah, I should get pomegranate. I think maybe I assume that a pomegranate should be like quicker to open up because it's like a small little fruit. It's a lot of effort for like a small little fruit, but it takes a long time to cut up a watermelon. Anyways, yeah, I should probably get pomegranates. Pomegranates are pretty good. So it's Rosh Hashanah tends to be pomegranate season, so that should be pretty soon. Anyways, so egoze perech v'rimone bedan. So these are things that they're, I guess, particularly delicious, and therefore they're significant, so they would be counted. And they would also, if they're like orla or kilei karim or something, they would be also ba'ano. So why don't we list those things as well? That they are counted because they're significant, and they're also ba'ano if they're like orla or kilei karim. Well, the reason why they're not listed here is because they're listed there. Where? Nesech orla. The Mishnais in Masechta Orla. That the Mishnah in Masechta Orla, Perek Gimel, Mishnah Zayin, lists a whole bunch of things. I would pull it out, but I'm just going to tell you. The Mishnah in Perek Gimel, Mishnah Zayin, Masechta Orla, lists a whole bunch of stuff, lists 6 things actually, including Egoze Perech and Rimone Bidan, and it says, right, and it's talking about things that make a whole mixture asur, and it says, if they're orla, then it'll make the whole mixture asur because of orla. If they are kilei karim, it'll make the whole mixture asur because of kilei karim. So the reason why they are not listed here, it's a good question, but the reason why they're not listed here is because they're listed there. They're listed in Masechta Orla. Listen to Kikrish Shel Baal Habayis. Okay, what about Chometz on Pesach? Loaves of Baal Habayis. Homeowner loaves. Those sound like delicious loaves. And I guess that they're significant enough that they are counted. So if we're talking about Chometz on Pesach, so that should be listed, right? It's also ba'ano, and it's counted. Whereas if listed Kikar Shel Baal Habayis, then Chometz b'Pesach. Well, Mancham is the Omelei, Rabbi Akiva. Well, who is the opinion who holds that Chometz on Pesach is asur ba'anoyo? Rabbi Akiva. Well, Hatana le'osam in Masechta Orla, Rabbi Akiva Taka teaches there in Masechta Orla. Rabbi Akiva Moshe B'Avkiku Shel Baal Habayis. Rabbi Akiva adds to the list of 6 a 7th. The loaves of bread of a Baal Habayis, that when it's Chometz b'Pesach, it would make the whole mixture asur ba'ano in any amount. So the reason why Egoze Perech, Rimone Bedan, Kikar Shel Baal Habayis are excluded, the reason is because they're already included somewhere else. They're already listed in Masechta Orla. Hare Elu Lemute Mai. So when the Mishnah says Hare Elu, these things, the things listed in our Mishnah, are asur and osun b'mashu. So we say these things to exclude what? Well, to exclude things like nevela, right? We didn't list nevela, which, while it's something that is counted, but it's mutter. Therefore, it was not listed here. Alternatively, things that are asur ba'ano, but are not counted. For example, chametz on Pesach. For example, chametz on Pesach, while it's asur ba'ano, it is not something that's necessarily counted unless it's kikaros ba'abayis, but it's a different story. And therefore, it is excluded from our Mishnah. The only things included in our Mishnah are things that fit both criteria. They are counted and asur ba'ano. Tosfos clarifies that just because these items aren't listed in the Mishnah does not mean that they are not asur b'mashu. What's that noise from I think my neighbor, every time they open up the gate, it makes this humongous noise. Anyways, sorry. I just heard my neighbor, I guess, leaving. That was a double negative when I was talking about Tosfos before I was talking about my neighbor. That something like nevela, for example, is actually asur b'mashu. The only reason why it's excluded from Mishnah is just because it doesn't meet both criteria. That while it's counted, it's not asur ba'ano, therefore it's excluded from the Mishnah, but it is actually asur b'mashu. Tosfos says you could also say the same thing about chametz, which while asur ba'ano, according to Rabbi Akiva, is excluded from our Mishnah because it's not davar sheb'minyan. But according to Rab, it is actually, points out Tosfos, asur b'mashu. So just because it was excluded from the Mishnah doesn't necessarily mean that it's not asur b'mashu. Let's say that positively. It could, just because it's excluded from the Mishnah, it could actually still be asur b'mashu. It just didn't meet the two criteria necessary for inclusion in our Mishnah. And now we get up to the next Mishnah. It says the Mishnah, Yayn nesech shnofel labor, kulo asur v'anoi Reb Shimon ben Gamliel omer, yimachu kulo lo v'kachom chutz midmei yayn nesech shebo cheved. This is something that's been coming up for ages. This Mishnah, we're finally getting to it. Says the Mishnah, again, Yayn nesech shnofel labor, that if Yayn nesech falls into a pit, kulo asur, the entire pit is asur, because Yayn nesech min b'mino is asur b'mashu. Says Reb Shimon ben Gamliel, yimacher kulo lo v'kachovim, that you can sell the contents of the pit to the overkuchavim, just that chutz midmei yayn nesech shebo. But the value of the yayn nesech that fell in must be, like, you can't get enough from that value. That value must be excluded from any benefit that you're getting from the sale. But otherwise, you could sell the rest of the wine, just not, you can't get value from the yayn nesech that fell in to the pit. Says the Gemara, Amar Rab, did this, we had this in the Gemara the other day, actually. And it says, Rab, when we're talking about a barrel of yayn nesech that get mixed together with a whole bunch of other barrels, so you could sell all of the barrels, just that minus the value of that one barrel of yayn nesech. But lo yayn b'yayn. But if some yayn nesech falls into some kosher wine, no, we're not going to go like Reb Shimon ben Gamliel there. If it's all mixed together in the wine itself, we would not pass on like Reb Shimon ben Gamliel. You can't just sell that wine minus the value of the yayn nesech. No, but one barrel that gets mixed together with other barrels, you could sell all of the barrels, just minus the value of the yayn nesech barrel. Ushmuel Amar, where Shmuel says afilu yayn b'yayn, where Shmuel says even if the yayn nesech gets mixed into the wine itself, we still paskin like Reb Shimon ben Gamliel that you could sell the wine just minus the value of the yayn nesech. V'chein Amar Rabbi Chanan Rabbi Yochanan, and so says Rabbi Chanan Rabbi Yochanan afilu yayn b'yayn, even yayn nesech that gets mixed into kosher wine. V'chein Amar Reb Shmuel bar Nosin Amar Reb Chanina afilu yayn b'yayn. Also says Reb Shmuel bar Nosin Reb Chanina, even if the wine yayn nesech gets mixed together to other wine, we would pass on like Reb Shimon ben Gamliel. V'chein Amar Rav Nachman Amar Barvua afilu yayn b'yayn. Amar Rav Nachman. Now says Rav Nachman, halacha lemaaseh. What do we do Yayn nesech, Yayn biyayin, asur, chavis, bechavis mutter, stam yaynam, afilu yayn biyayin, mutter. Says Rav Nachman, halacha lemaaseh, there's a difference between Yayn nesech and stam yaynam. By Yayn nesech, when it comes to barrels, you have a whole bunch of barrels, but one barrel of Yayn nesech got mixed in there. We don't know which one it is. You could sell all the barrels just minus the value of one barrel of Yayn nesech. But for wine itself, if Yayn nesech gets mixed together with other wine, no, you can't get benefit from that wine. Says Rav Nachman. But if we're talking about stam yaynam, however, not Yayn nesech, but stam yaynam, that stam wine that's owned by an Ovid Kachavim that we don't know that it was necessarily libated for Avodah Zarah, stam yaynam. So there, even if some stam yaynam gets mixed together with some actual kosher wine, we would possibly there that you could sell all the wine minus the value of the yayn, the stam yaynam. And now we get to that Ayin Dalid Omid Beis, to the next Mishnah, and here we transition into kashering things. And when you have vessels, whether it's a wine press or whether it's a knife, whatever it might be, we're not going to get to knives today. When it comes to vessels that were owned, used by Ovdei Kachavim, what can you do to make them kosher, to make them usable for kosher stuff, whether it's wine, whether it's for use in your kitchen? So we are going to be transitioning into those sugyas now. For the rest of the daf, it's going to be a little bit technical. It's going to be pretty technical, I'd say. But still, we're transitioning. Says the Mishnah, Gas shel Evan, a stone wine press. Shezofsa Ovid Kachavim, that an Ovid Kachavim applied pitch to it. Now, we had seen this already ages ago. Probably a daf like Lamed or something. We talked about the pitch that is applied to, we had talked about it in terms of flasks, but now we're talking about it in terms of a wine press, and they would apply pitch as some kind of a coating, I guess. And when they would apply the pitch, they would also add wine as part of the process. They also added wine. So Gashel Evan Shezov Ovid Kachavim. So a stone wine press that an Ovid Kachavim applied pitch to, and then also as part of that Yayn nesech, wine. Minagba v'hitorah. So you do something called niguv. I don't really understand what niguv is, or like when we do it. Like, is niguv something that we like actually do nowadays, and in what context? I'm not like super clear on what this niguv thing is. Hagala, I get what that is, boiling in water, right? Libun, direct fire, tevila and a mikvah. I know what these things are. I don't really know what niguv is. If anybody has any ideas of, like, practically speaking, maybe somebody worked in the kitchen or something, I don't know. Maybe somebody worked in kashrus, knows how niguv is applied lemaaseh. Let us know. But akoponim, you do this thing, it's called niguv. And then we're going to talk about niguv definitely tomorrow. Yeah, we're going to talk about it tomorrow, niguv, but it's basically, I think technically means drying. You apply like ash to it. I wonder if the point is that like ash is kind of like a kind of soap, maybe. So like you'd apply water and like ash and scrub it, maybe. Maybe it's kind of just like wash it with soap kind of thing. I don't really quite get it. Vitor, and then that's okay. Okay? So if you do niguv on this stone wine press that has been pitched, do niguv, all good. Vishal eitz, and if the wine press is made out of wood, Rebbe Omer says, Rebbe, Yinagev, you can also do niguv, whereas the Chacham said what you have to do is you have to scrape off the pitch. You can't just do niguv on the pitch, you have to scrape off. You have to remove the pitch. B'shel cheres, if we're talking about earthenware, that earthenware is a very absorbent earthenware. Even though you scraped off the pitch, asur, it's still asur. By cheres, by earthenware, even if you scrape off the pitch, not going to help. It's still asur. So we said that when it comes to a wine press of stone that's been pitched, so you do niguv. If we're talking about if it's made of wood and it's been pitched, Rebbe says do niguv. The Chum say you have to scrape off the pitch. When it comes to earthenware, nothing you can do. Says the Gemara, Amar Rove, says Rove, Davka Zofsa. Okay, so specifically if it was pitched, okay, Avodah Zarah, but if you didn't, if it was unpitched, and you trampled wine in the wine press, then you would not, I believe you would not have to do niguv, right? What does that say? Then you just need to rinse it off. You don't need to do niguv, just rinse it off, I guess without any ash or anything like that. Just rinse it off. Okay, so again, and my Rava says, Rava, dabke zofsa, specifically if it was pitched, you do niguv. Avol dorachba, but if grapes were stomped on without any pitch, you don't need to do niguv, just rinse it off. Pshita, this is Avi Zofsa Tnan. Well, the Mishnah is taught, specifically said, okay, our Mishnah is talking about pitched scenarios. So, when we're talking about niguv, it's in pitched scenarios. In unpitched scenarios, there's no indication that you would have to do niguv. Sure, rinsing seems fine. So, I may have thought, I may have thought, well, the same halacha applies to when it's unpitched and it was stomped in. It would still require niguv. And the reason why the Mishnah talks about pitched, because that's, I guess, the more common example, kamash malan. Therefore, what Rav is teaching us is that it's specifically pitched. But if unpitched, so then no niguv required. Igedamir, those who say, Amarave davka zofsa, says Rava, specifically pitched and unstomped on. But if you stomped on a pitched wine press, lo sagila beniguv, niguv would be insufficient. So when our Mishnah says if it's pitched, you can do niguv, that's if it's only pitched. But if it's pitched and stomped on, grapes were stomped on that pitched wine press, niguv would be insufficient. Pshita zofsa tnan. This is obvious. The Mishnah only says pitched, not pitched and stomped. Well, I may have thought that even though it doesn't say anything about stomping, it includes stomping. It means pitched and stomped, meaning it includes, even if it were pitched and stomped, you would still be able to do niguv. By the Katani Zofsa, the reason why it only mentions unstomped pitch is Orcha de Milsa Katani, because that's the more common scenario. Kamash Malan, Davka Zofsa. So therefore, it comes Rava to say it's specifically pitched and unstomped. Aval but pitched and stomped. Lo sagila beniguv, niguv would be insufficient. Yahuda also the the Reb Chia, like the fellow who came before Reb Chia. Omelay, and he says to Reb Chia, Havli Gavra, send me somebody de dachi li matzarto, you could purify my wine press for me. Omelay the Rav, so Reb Chia put his nephew Rav to the task. Zil bade. Go with this fellow, go check out his wine press and see if you can help him. Where am I? Sorry, my earplugs have been a little funny. Okay, where are we? So again, so the Auda also accommodate Reb Chia, Amalei, have the Gabe de Dochi Matzatoi, Amalei, Lerav Zilbade, Vichazid lo Matzvachas Ole Be Midrasha, and Rav, make sure that you get it right. Make sure that nobody's going to come to our Beis HaMedrash and be all yelling and screaming and huffing and puffing. Rav, make sure to handle this properly so that this fellow doesn't get upset with me. Also, Rav says, sure, uncle, no problem. and he goes with this fellow to his wine press. And he saw that the wine press was pitched and was very, very smooth pitched. And Rav assumed, this must not have ever been trampled on. Well, sounds like we got ourselves a niguv situation. Omar, havade b'niguv sagila. Well, if this is simply pitched and never been stomped on, niguv should do the trick. However, Rav was not satisfied with simply a superficial checking. He went deeper. He was looking around, and sure enough, he found chazapila mituse. He saw that there was a crack, there was a split. V'chazadav amoli chamra, and he saw that there was a lot of wine that was hardened, stuffed in to that crack, i.e., it would seem that this wine press was actually stomped on in. Omar, he says, although sagila beniguv, to which he says, okay, well, it looks like what we've got here is a wine press that is pitched and stomped. Niguv is insufficient. Elabekiluf, you're going to have to scrape off the pitch. And this is clearly what my chavivi, what my uncle Reb Chia meant when he says, be thorough. Make sure no one's going to come and scream and yell and huff and puff in the Beis HaMedrash. And Rav says, okay, I'm glad that I was thorough and that I identified that this wine press was stomped in and it's insufficient to do niguv. We're going to have to remove the pitch. Tanu Rabbanon, the rabbis taught, Hagas v'amachatz v'amashpech, a wine press. This is like, I think it was called a dipper. I think it's basically like in my mind, like it's basically like a ladle. A ladle, it's like a combination of like a pot and a ladle kind of. Yeah, I was thinking about maybe putting this photo of it in a slide, but I really don't think it's necessary. It's basically like a ladle. You know, it's like a ladle that you use, but whereas ladle is just going to get like a scoop of soup, it's going to be bigger to be able to get more in it. But it's basically scooping out wine and then scooping it out of the wine press and putting it into the barrels. That's what the machatz is. So it's essentially like a ladle of sorts. So it's talking about a wine press, a machatz, and this dipper, this ladle dipper, mamashvech, and a funnel. Of the chum of the chum. Rebbe matir beniguv. Rebbe says niguv is sufficient. Now the thing is, what is going to be apparent in a minute is that this is talking about earthenware. It's talking about earthenware. Now in our Mishnah, if we go back to the end of our Mishnah, it says v'shel cheres. If we're talking about earthenware, afal pisha kolaf v'sazepes arezo asur. There's nothing you can do. It's asur. And here Rebbe is saying, what's Rebbe saying? Rebbe matir beniguv. Rebbe says you could just do niguv. So we're going to have to answer that. V'cham osur. But the chacham say asur. Okay. Umode Rebbe. Now Rebbe admits, okay. Fine. Umode Rebbe. However, Rebbe admits when it comes to jugs of ovdei kochavim shein asur, and that they are asur. Does Rashi say anything? Yeah. Okay. Okay. So look. You don't have to look at Rashi. I'm going to read Rashi to the left and a little bit up. Umoda bekankadim shel cheres, of earthenware, afapisha ein mezupafin, even though they are not pitched, she'asurin ad sheyimloim, that they are asur until they are filled gimel yom for 3 days, mayim umayru me'es leis, and spill them out every 24 hours. Because amina be'em amidin, like we said in Perek Amidin. If you remember at Daf Lamed Gimel, we talked about this thing where you can like fill a jug up with water, leave the water in for 24 hours, dump it out, refill it. We do this like over the course of 3 days. So Kilu Rebbe is saying that he's saying Rebbe admits bekankanim that when it comes to jugs, shalov de kochavim shein asurin, that they are asurin, and you're gonna have to do this filling up, pouring out of water stuff to make it mutter. How come Rebbe says in the first things, by the wine press, by the funnel, by the dipper, that you can use niguv, and by the kankan you can not. It's also, the answer is ze machniso lekiyum, ze machniso lekiyum. The difference is that the jugs are used for long-term storage. Because they're used for long-term storage, niguv is insufficient. But those other vessels, like a funnel, you use it just momentarily, or a ladle, right? So therefore, those niguv is sufficient. Mishal eitz, mishal even. So now that was earthenware. Now we're talking about wood and stone. Yinogev, do niguv. V'imhayu mizupafin, and if they were pitched, asurin, then they are asurin. V'atnan gas shel even shezofsa or v'kchov menagba v'torah. Why are we saying that if they are pitched? Right, we're talking about wood, we're talking about stone, and we just said that if they're pitched, they're asurin. But in our Mishnah, we had said that if it's made, if you have a stone wine press and it is pitched, you do niguv. Right, again, Ba'atanan, gas shel even. Our Mishnah says gas shel even shezofsa, that was pitched. Shezofsa over krom. Minagva v'torah. Just do niguv. And here we're saying it's asur. Masisim delo dorach ba. Brisa de dorach ba. Well, our Mishnah is talking about where it was just pitched, but not stomped on. Here we're talking about where it's stomped on, which is why it is asur. And therefore, because it was stomped on in the brisa, you wouldn't be able to do niguv. You would have to peel off the pitch. Amar, we said earlier, agas, the wine press, v'amachatz, and the dipper, v'amashpech, and the funnel, shalodei kochavim. Rebbe mater beniguv. Rebbe says you could do niguv. Now that's talking about klei cheres, though. But we said our Mishnah shel cheres apal pi shekol v'zazefes arizo asur. But our Mishnah said that when it comes to cheres, when it comes to earthenware, even what do we say? Even if you scrape off the pitch, not going to help. Asur. So how is Rebbe saying over here? You could do niguv. Amarav is safe at the mastis and asan rabban. Well, the safe of that final part of the Mishnah, which says by klei cheres it's asur, that's not Rebbe, that's the rabban. Rebbe would say that you can do niguv. Darash Rave darshan naiva artichu. Now this is interesting. A naiva, I think is a wine press, right? What does Rashi say? Hagas, yeah, wine press. Articho beroschen. A wine press. Take boiling water, and pour the boiling water on the wine press. So Tosfos gets into this whole discussion, which I'm not really going to get into, but I just want to point out, it's a very interesting discussion about irui. Pouring boiling water onto something. Is it considered like a kli rishon, right? Like the like if you were to take something and put it in boiling water, right? Rabbi Kan Omer Rabbeinu Tam says Tosfos, the iri kichli rishon, that iri pouring something is the equivalent of as if it's like boiling in the pot itself, like right, kli rishon versus kli sheni. Whereas the Rashbam says that actually, when you pour hot water on something, it's not considered like kli rishon. It's considered as if it's in a second, like one step less intense, right? Kli sheni. There's another sheet in Tosfos that again I'm not going to get into because it gets a little technical. Yeah, I just don't want to get into all details, but I thought that it was interesting to point out that this is part of kind of a sugya of irui, of pouring hot water on things, and how that could work for kashering. Very, very interesting. Rave Kiava Mishader Gulfe Harpanya Rave, when he would send empty jugs. Sachiflu Apumai, what he would do is he would put it in some kind of a sack, but we saw this, I think that we saw this. Maybe we didn't see it. I can't remember. But he would take these jugs and flip them upside down so that the opening part of the jug was at the bottom. And then would seal the sack or whatever that it was in. Meaning, oh gosh. He would take a sack, okay, and he would take the jug and put it in upside down. And then he would seal the sack at the top. Birtzayu is basically the bottom of the jug, but basically the point is the bottom of the jug was at the top of the sack. So he would seal the top of the sack. It was like a double seal. V'chosim lu birtzayu kasovar Because since this is, I think the point is that since these are jugs, these were empty jugs, I think, but I think the point is that even though these were empty jugs, because they are jugs that are used for long-term storage, you wanted to be like extra careful that the Ovikov was going to tamper with it. So therefore, he had like a double seal, meaning if he would have the jugs right side up, so then the Ovikov can it would be easy access for those Ovikov to just kind of open up the sack and I guess use the jug. But since it was upside down, it would be a little bit more effort to like right side it up and in order to use it, because specifically we're talking about a jug that is kind of more longer term storage, and therefore we have to be more careful with it. That was Daf Ayin Dalil, Daf 74 of Masechta Avodah Zarah. The first section, the first part of today's Daf, we talked about things that are asur in any amount. We listed a whole bunch of things that, even though we're not talking about flavors, right, tam, these are things that if they are mixed in any amount, for example, basar b'chalav, a piece of meat that had some milk that got mixed into it, and it's asur, that gets mixed together with a whole bunch of other pieces of meat, they're all asur, right? These are, right, anything listed in the Mishnah, they are going to make any mixtures that they are in entirely asur. So these are not flavor types of mixtures. Listed are things that are both asur ba'ana'ah and counted. Therefore, we excluded nevela, for example, which is counted but is mutar ba'ana'ah, and chametz b'pesach, which is asur ba'ana'ah but is not counted. We talked about Yayn nesech that falls into a pit. The Chacham say all of the wine in the pit is asur. Reb Shimon ben Gamliel says you can sell all of the wine except for the Yayn nesech value. Now, when it comes to Yayn nesech, we hold like Reb Shimon ben Gamliel for barrels. If you have one barrel that gets mixed in with a whole bunch of other barrels, you could sell all of them minus the value of the barrel of Yayn nesech. But if Yayn nesech gets mixed in with wine, the whole mixture is going to be also, you can't sell that mixture. But by stam yainam, we hold like Reb Shimon ben Gamliel even for wine. So some stam yainam gets mixed with some other wine, you could sell the wine minus the value of the stam yainam. And then we got into kashering a wine press, and there was just, I'm not really going to get into all, there was a lot of details depending on if it was pitched or not pitched. Did you stomp on it, etc. But we did talk about the concept of niguv, which is somehow, we're going to get more into the details of niguv tomorrow in terms of using ash and water and mixing it together and what that process is like. We talked a little bit about irui, pouring hot water on things. We didn't say it's literally like 2 words in the Gemara, but it did kind of touch on that concept. Anyways, tomorrow we are going to wrap up this niguv discussion and start talking about kashering things with like hagala and libun and things like that. Chaver, have an awesome day. Peace out.